Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This past week we've finally been given confirmation of Nintendo's E3 Direct presentation and Treehouse event happening on the exact day that everyone kind of presumed the Direct would be on. The final day of the biggest gaming event of the year probably, the 15th of June for the E3 2021 event. So with it slowly gaining closer and closer onto us now, only being 9 days away when this video goes up, I thought there would be no better time to discuss both my hopes and expectations for Nintendo's E3 in the context of Zelda, since of course this is a Zelda channel, though I will be publishing my expectations for E3 in general on my Patreon, so if you're a patron then you have that to look forward to if it isn't out already. Last thing is that if you enjoy Zelda content and want to see more videos on Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever it'll be called after E3, then please do consider subscribing now. Now then, without further ado, I believe it's time to get into my hopes first off. I'll discuss my hopes and then my expectations. Let me quickly state that hopes are allowed to be at least a little unrealistic, and obviously everything that I state here in either the hopes or the expectations section won't be at the presentation. I'm just guessing individual things that could be at the presentation. Otherwise, the stuff I'll mention today could honestly fit an entire 30-minute Zelda Direct by itself, so just keep that in mind while I'm going through these. I'll go through my hopes in the order of least important to most important in my own personal opinion. First off, I absolutely love Age of Calamity. Like seriously, the music in the game and presentation in general is absolutely top notch, and honestly, the game never overstays its welcome for how long it lasts. I personally think that it was a great sequel spiritually to the original Hyrule Warriors game, and honestly added a ton overall to the Warriors gameplay. There were certain aspects of the game that definitely hooked me. Suffice it to say that news on the DLC ranks very lowly on this list, and that's purely because I really enjoyed the gameplay of normal Zelda more overall. But while we're here, we may as well talk about the DLC a little bit, and my hopes for now. I'll talk about the likelihood of the game getting a section at E3 in my expectations list, but overall I'm really hoping for some very cool characters to be added to the game. And I would absolutely love for at least a nice little amount of extra content to keep me occupied until the release of the second wave, and the same there. I'm not sure whether it's been stated how many characters will be in each wave of the DLC, but going off of the assumption that they only add 1 or 2 per wave, in the first one I'd really love to see Cass come back to play, just as a personal hope. I know some people would rather have other characters be playable, and trust me, we will definitely talk about that later. Right, moving off of Age of Calamity for just a little bit, it's time to quickly talk about the game that's caused even more of a stir between the Zelda community than Age of Calamity. Overall, it's had an even bigger impact on the Nintendo community and the gaming community as a whole really. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD port. Now, I've talked a little bit about how I feel on the port itself in the past, but I'm trying to put my feelings behind me for the actual port until after E3. While some people won't have you believe it, there is a very real chance that the Zelda team has decided to prolong the screening of new features for the game until after E3, or during E3, where more people will be looking at the company than ever. I mean, they really have the opportunity to blow E3 away again, just like they did back in 2019. But enough of these tangents, I keep going on. The point is that I hope, like with all of my hope, that Nintendo has something else to show us about Skyward Sword HD that isn't locked behind an amiibo as a physical paywall. I'm personally not too wound up about this whole debacle though. I do think Nintendo should be called out for their decisions on this one, and while I think all of their decisions with the game up until now have been pretty poor, I think everyone could concede this. But what if they pull it out the bag last second and show a ton of quality of life features that go a long way with this port? What if they add an extra dungeon? Of course, I could only expect as much as a gauntlet-like dungeon like the Cave of Shadows in Twilight Princess HD, but doing something other than the bare minimum for the base game would really go a long way for the fans right now. Don't get me wrong, no matter what they do, the quality of life feature locked behind the amiibo will always be there, but I really do think it would soften the blow for a game that deserves a break from online discourse. Again, I'm in no way defending Nintendo, but I think the game is getting a ton of bad rep online from people who've never even really played the original game. So let's call it more a hope to put the game back on track. This one is a hope that I haven't really talked about much, but I have seen flung around in certain conversations to do with Zelda at the moment. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask coming over to the Switch on an NSO upgrade for N64 games. There's a reason that this is a hope, otherwise I'd ask for them both to be remade. You'll hear that in a second, but seeing these games come over in any capacity really just feels like the best thing to do. Not to mention N64 NSO cooperation is now long overdue without a doubt. So there's that. Maybe a more discreet hope there. Next up in my hopes is something that I've talked about at length over the past few months, and is something that I really do not think would have any online discourse surrounding it. This would be a Zelda 35th anniversary collection much alike to Mario's. I'll spare the nitty gritty details, though I will say that this is slowly becoming more and more unlikely as time comes on. And this will be the last time that I'll actively predict it for an event, at least for a long time anyway. I would personally like this to be Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD. I think the opportunity is there and I would love for them to just take it. These are two of my favourite games ever, especially Twilight Princess, and if they made the price tag somewhat right for both games, then I could see this going over as an excellent idea. Not to mention that this would mean that every single 3D Zelda is on the system in some capacity. Even if very little, as long as the N64 Virtual Console idea goes ahead. Considering I've spoken about every other game except Breath of the Wild, you can probably guess where this is going. I really want a Breath of the Wild trailer that gives us a release window at least, maybe even a date if we're lucky, and even a single Switch Pro rumour is real, and I'd also like to be able to see the theming through the trailer to really find out what the game could really be about, since the teaser trailer, it's shown us something, but we need to see more of it. So we'll see in that regard, but above most things, I would really like a name reveal. It feels really weird calling a new Zelda game the last one with a 2 at the end, after so long. So I'd really love if we can get a name. This would also stop all of those fake name leaks that have been going around since late 2019, because gosh, some of those are ridiculous. I'd really like to see underground exploration personally, though I really like when the team explores darker areas, so I get this might not be everybody's cup of tea. But barring that, I'd love to see sky exploration instead. I mean, it would make sense with what we've seen so far, but we'll have to wait and see. A quick mention would be the announcement of a 2D Zelda, but honestly I don't know where it ranks in terms of hype, and I also personally think it would be Four Swords Adventures, which I would really like as long as you can play online. A small hope, but one nonetheless. Right, so now we've taken a step back from the optimist in all of us, I'll be taking a look at each thing I talked about a little to see how likely I personally think each thing is, and then going ahead and stating my exact expectations at the end of the video. So, could they show Age of Calamity DLC? It's pretty much a no-brainer that this will happen unless Koei Tecmo shows off the DLC before the E3 presentation. The DLC itself comes out this month and we literally know nothing about it up until this point to my knowledge, and honestly I kinda like knowing that before going into an E3. Next up is new Skyward Sword features. Realistically, do I think that there will be a trailer for the game? Most definitely. But do I think that new things will be shown? Honestly a little bit, but I'm not getting my hopes up there. I'm expecting like a couple of quality of life changes that would make the game slightly easier to cope with, and I would still like that enough, though it wouldn't be enough to stop the constant hate on the game. Which is a bit of a shame. Maybe I'm being slightly pessimistic here, but we'll see. The next thing I discussed was the inclusion of N64 games making the jump to NSO, and I think that this is kinda likely now. We've been playing NES and SNES games for a while now. Even though Nintendo is still dodging certain games to send over to each service, it seems like the well for new exciting games to send over is growing rather dry, and this is why they might just need to refresh the service a little. There is a large chance that they port Game Boy games over first, but it'd complete the Triforce if they could send over Ocarina of Majora over there instead. But keep in mind, some handheld Zeldas may make the jump instead, or maybe there just won't be anything new for NSO yet. It'd be disappointing for sure though. Next is my dream collection of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, and I still think this is somewhat likely, but I'm slowly losing my faith, I must admit. It would just be so easy that I'm still riding on it for now, but if it doesn't happen during E3, then maybe it's time to drop it though. Breath of the Wild 2 news seems pretty likely. I mean, it's been 2 years since the teaser, it's E3 and it's just time. There's a chance that the team wait until later in the year to give us more, but I personally doubt it. So what exactly am I expecting from Zelda's E3? Personally speaking, I'm expecting very little, even though this video has gone on for so long. That's only to ensure that I'm not killed by the hype though. I think a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, Age of Calamity DLC, a new trailer for Skyward Sword, and one or more Zelda games coming over to the Switch doesn't seem very unrealistic. But listen to me right now, it doesn't matter if you don't listen to the rest of this video, but listen to this. Tamper your expectations, expect less, otherwise you will be disappointed at E3. And we really don't need that right now after the couple years we've had. So just try your hardest to tamper your expectations. With that said, what are your expectations for E3 for Nintendo and why? Tell me down in the comments below and I'll get to replying to everyone that I can. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed then please do like and subscribe, since there's no doubt going to be plenty to talk about in the Zelda world after E3 no matter what happens. And I'll be at the front line of that every single week since I do weekly uploads. The people you can see on screen right now are my Patreon supporters, and they are just the coolest. And summed you up there is the king of the cool hill by being my top paying patron. Thanks for the continued support everyone. If you'd like to join them, then you can for as little as £1 or $1.50 a month, or more if you're feeling generous. You can do that in the link to my Patreon in the description. Along with that link are the links to the rest of my media platforms, so follow me there to keep up with me. Thank you all so much for watching one last time, and let's get hyped. We're on the home stretch to E3. Please do stay safe, and I'll see you next week. where we will be talking just a little bit more about E3 before the Nintendo event.